legendary radio host Richard Todd is back with the Morning Buzz here on 105.5 The Bridge. I sit down exclusively with Richard for a special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and download my free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. Legendary Richard Todd, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Well, I'm flattered that you asked me to be on it, and I'm even more flattered that you used the word legendary, so thank you very much. I resemble that remark. So,
you know, when you're joining 105.5 The Bridge as this new morning host with the Morning Buzz, and people just started flooding social media with, yeah, he's back, we want this, we've been waiting on this. Where are you emotionally in your mind about that?
That's a good question, because I will say that as we've gotten things going, it's been a little bit surreal. It's been strangely familiar, yet totally foreign at the same time. You know, I've been off the air for over 7 years, and you never know. That's a long time in people's memories, collective memories, and you never know what the reception is going to be like. Fortunately, I have been around town for a long time, from doing shows in the 90s and then doing talk radio at the beginning of this century. And so having been around for a while, and Charleston is a great town that I've been embraced and welcomed back, and I'm flattered by that as well. But it definitely is a process to sort of wrap my mind around doing this job again. Yeah.
I've been doing Quintin's Close-Ups for 7 years. You've been off the radio for 7 years. What is the biggest difference between broadcasting in your mind these days?
Well, the technology has changed so much, and that's one of the things that actually energized me about doing the show. Nowadays, people can get in the palm of their hand access to anything they want. They can listen to anything. They can watch anything. It's a brave new world, and so that has trickled on to radio, where radio has become more and more syndicated, more and more homogenized. And with what we're doing at the Bridge is we're making it live, and we're making it local. And Charleston is such an insular community. That's the old saying, we don't take kindly to people from off. And so having been in town for 3 decades, that familiarity, you have that relationship that you develop with people. But the technology has made it now that people can listen to anything they want to on the internet and satellite radio and with Pandora and Spotify and whatever. So what we have to do is to create a radio station and a show that is live and local and interactive and reflects the community and has that adult lifestyle while also having a lot of fun. So it is sort of going back to the future, the way radio used to be.
Right.
And a lot of people will say how corporatization has really made radio not as much fun and listenable as it used to be. Well, we're going back to the future on the Bridge and on the Morning Buzz. So.
And you talked a little bit about it, but why do people still trust you?
That's a great question. I think because over the years, I just tried to tell it like it was. Nowadays, common sense is so uncommon. And if you just speak objectively, we miss objectivity nowadays in the public forum. It's either this side or that side. It's either black or white. Well, most people live in the gray area, and they want to hear someone who's speaking to them in a reasoned way. Now, the risk of that, of course, is that you're talking to somebody who all of a sudden, everything that they thought they were thinking, they believed in, you contradict them by what you're saying. But if you can make someone think, if you can provoke a thought, a reaction, then you're going to be halfway there to having a conversation, dialogue. And so much nowadays is monologue that I think over the years I was able to establish sort of a place to have a conversation, and that people knew that I was going to shoot straight. I know a friend of mine used to say that the only thing you find in the middle of the road are dead animals. But being in the middle of the road allows you to be objective and look at either side of a situation, because people want labels. They want something that is easy for them to digest. Are you this or are you that? Well, it depends on what we're talking about. But they're looking for a label, and I'm not going to allow that, because I have a multitude of positions on a multitude of issues, and Charleston's such an incredibly diverse place. You want to hear from everybody. And so I think I've been able to establish that reputation over the years, and now we're bringing it to a radio show that will take the elements of the music shows we've done in the past and the talk shows we've done and smash them together and create a brand new something. It's still a work in progress.
Work in progress. Yep. You talk about progress. It's been at least 7 years since you lost your wife. Where are you emotionally? Who's Richard Todd these days?
You know, that's it's with you every hour of every day. At first, when it first happened back in January 2012, it's with you every second, and then it's with you every minute. Now I can say it's with you every hour. I have a 16-year-old son, and my job is to raise him and to be a fine young man, and he's doing that himself at Wando High School and go off to college. It was the promise that I made to my wife, and it's the right thing to do as a parent. And so I had no problem walking away from the radio in 2012 and raising my son. It was the right thing to do. But it takes something out of you when you go through a loss like I did with my wife, and she was only 44, and she was just an incredibly special person. That it changes you. Your DNA is never the same, and you know, my temperament and disposition has changed because all of a sudden you really realize what's important. And when you go through something that's that traumatic, you know, my son, I often refer to, he was my life preserver. He kept me from drowning in sort of a sea of sadness and grief and heartbreak and staying on the path. And it really was only until he began high school that I started thinking, it's time for me to get back out there in the world and see what's going on. And the people at the 105.5 The Bridge were, it's all a matter of timing, you know, and so I feel very fortunate and very lucky. But she's with me all the time, and I see her when I look at my son every day, and I think she'd be very proud of her son. And I like to think that she's listening to me in the mornings, and she's got a smile. So we have the ultimate guardian angel, and it's nothing that you ever get over. You take it with you. It's always with you, and it's and you could be having a great day, and then something triggers a memory, an emotion, and then you can be a total wreck. And it's just part of the deal that you get when you're that crazy about someone, and then tragedy strikes. But life goes on, and we keep going on to make sure that my son is good, and that we continue to enjoy this life, because I sure know my wife would if she was here. So.
Yeah, you're right about that. You obviously talked on your, I believe it was, you were talking with the critic the other day,
yeah.
And you said there's so much to talk about, so much to do. What is there to talk about when it comes to Charleston? Because you just said this is a diverse city here.
Oh, wow, man, Charleston is a small town with big city qualities. I mean, one of the things that we talked about before is the things that we're discussing now are going to be the way your city evolves in the next 10 or 20 years. So the things that we talked about 10, 15, 20 years ago, we said, you better get involved now because it's going to come, you know. And a lot of times what happens is people will notice something or notice an issue when they see a bulldozer somewhere and it's moving the dirt. Well, by then it's too late. It's the zoning meetings, it's the elections, it's the leaders and the politicians that you have to get involved in. I mean, you could just look at how much, the 1990s in Charleston was one of the great decades in the history of the city. So much has changed since then. Traffic, growth, infrastructure, people. Some things haven't changed, like traffic and flooding and infrastructure, but you know, we're victims of our own success. And so you have so many people coming here, and there are a lot of people who were here for a very long time, and it creates that clash, the clash of the old guard, the Charlestonians, the SOBs, the South of Broads, and then the new people who have moved here from other places. And that culture clash is a really interesting dynamic, because you'll have people who will come into town and say, well, this is how we did it back at home. And in Charleston, we're like, well, we don't care how you did it there. This is how we do it here. And there's just a very interesting dynamic going on now with our growth and trying to find a way to make it work, because it's the #1 city in the world. So everyone's invited, but there definitely are issues. I guess the idea that Charleston is a community and not a commodity, and that debate rages on to this day.
Yep. You also said this too. Your new show, The Morning Buzz, is the morning meeting place for the Low Country. When people meet you on the radio, what should they be listening for?
Wow. Well, a good time, a good place to wake up. I mean, when you wake up in the morning, you know, you can be in a cranky, foul mood. I totally get that. And you want someone who's going to be, I mean, radio nowadays is a utensil. People use it in the background. They're getting ready for work. They get in their car. They want to know the traffic. They want to know the weather. Right. They want to hear some good music. They want to hear what's going on in their town. That's what's missing from radio nowadays, is there's so few local shows involved in the local community that have an active lifestyle, that are adult oriented, community focused. And so that's really what I'm trying to go for in the Morning Buzz, and it has been since I started the Morning Buzz way back when and been on the radios in the 90s. You just want to create a place that becomes habit forming, that they wake up and like, what's Richard talking about today? I wonder what they're doing on that show this morning. And if you do that, then that's half the battle. People will tune in and then it becomes habit forming. And then you have to make sure that you keep them coming back. And so you just want to try to have fun and make people think and smile and off to school and work, you know.
And you also said this too. You said the the co-host is the listeners.
Yeah.
Who is your favorite listener over the past couple decades?
Well, okay, I'm going to answer that unfairly. I'm going to say my late wife, because she was a big fan, and we apparently interacted and crossed paths dozens of times in the 90s, and we never really communicated. We never really talked. In fact, I've got pictures of me with other people, and in the background you see this disinterested woman, and it would end up being my wife. But she was my biggest fan. And she listened religiously, and she would be my sounding board. I could bounce things off of her, and we would have conversations, and she would talk me off the ledge, you know, like and try to get my stress level down. And oftentimes we'd be sitting there saying a conversation, and something she said I would file away, and then I would use it on the air the next morning, and she's like, "I know where you got that from. You got that from us." But I'm gonna be prejudiced from the standpoint that it was my wife. That my late wife, that she was my number one fan and my favorite listener. But it's hard to pick one because there have been so many over the years, and I appreciate every one of them. And as we say, if you don't have anything good to say, call the station and speak clearly into your phone, because we'd love to have a good conversation. So.
Good conversation. Where should the conversation go next when it comes to radio?
Well, you know, radio has become so automated, so corporatized, so homogenized. Radio has now become like Baskin Robbins. You know, what flavor do you want? You know, do you want urban? Do you want soft rock? Do you want talk? Do you want country? And, you know, nowadays there's been such fragmentation in listenership that what radio was when we were growing up back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, whatever, you know, you became a friend of that person on the air, and it was someone that you knew. And one of the things that I think is great is you go out in the public here in Charleston, and Charleston's we're the most polite city in America. We have been for a long time. I think they stopped giving us that award because we were so polite. But, you know, radio has become so disinterested in what's happening locally that, as I said earlier, to go back to the future, to go back to what radio was, to be a part of the local community, to be in a relationship with the listener, that it sounds so revolutionary, but it's just so simple. Look at the way podcasting has blown up. There's hundreds of thousands of podcasts. Everybody's got a podcast nowadays. Yeah, and I have Toddcasts.
Oh, yes.
But that's coming soon, the Toddcast. But the idea that, you know, that anybody can have a voice, and that's fine. But at the same time, while you have all these choices, you got to go back to what it is that matters to you locally. And so the idea that radio has all of a sudden rediscovered, hey, you know, content actually matters. You know, I mean, people can hear that song by Taylor Swift, or they can hear it in a million different places. So what's the difference in them listening to it on satellite radio or the internet or whatever, or on a local radio station? Well, that local radio station better provide something local that's compelling, that is relatable, so that they're going to listen to that Taylor Swift song and anything else that's on that station, because stations nowadays have become jukeboxes, and voices have become recordings, voice tracked from other cities, and so it's lost that locality. And that's one thing in Charleston, is again, we don't take kindly to people from off. We like the local things in Charleston. We like local people who we are familiar with, that have been here a long time, that are going out and about in the town or are talking about that, and like, I know this guy, I'm doing the same thing he is. That's what's missing from radio, and I think it's hilarious that radio is rediscovering through podcasting that content and personalities actually maybe matter a little bit. So.
Rediscovering. What type of genre describes you these days after the tragedy in your life and the rebirth of your radio career?
That, you know, that's sort of the interesting thing is, you know, in the 90s, we were a part of a legendary station, 96 Wave, that was at the forefront of all the alternative movement and alternative music. And it was really one of the great music stations in America. So that music background, and then I sort of evolved into talk radio. WTMA was, you know, the oldest station in town and a legendary station here in Charleston. And all of a sudden, it became less rock, more talk. And so by doing those two things, I hope to kind of take those two and smash them together to create a new monster, something that actually gives you the soundtrack to your life, the soundtrack to your morning, but also talks about compelling issues and events and things that matter, things that make a difference in your life, things that you can relate to because when you're driving through the flooding, when you're stuck on 526, when you're dealing with schools in the Tri-County area and the growth issues that we were talking about and so many other things, you want to hear from somebody who actually knows what they're talking about, that actually has been here for a long time. And the great thing is that I might know what I'm talking about. I pretend that I do, and I like to think that I do, but I sure know that listeners and viewers and people out there, they know because they're living it every day. So if I can include the listeners as my co-host, they're going to contribute so much more, and then you're going to maybe hear something that you might not have thought of. And it's all part of being the Charleston community. That's why I call my show the unofficial morning show of the Carolina Coast, because we're going to wake everybody up and we're going to talk about what's going on right here in town.
That is so amazing. That's very amazing.
And it's a lot of fun too.
Right.
So, beats working. But actually, there's a lot of work that goes on in being prepped and being ready to talk about it. You know, I've always laughed about that with radio. They're like, oh, it's just you in a room talking, and how hard can that be? Okay, come on in and try. And a lot of people will freeze up, or after 5-10 minutes, they're like, I've got nothing. How do you do this?
Yes.
And, you know, and I used to do 4.5 hours of talk a day. Now I actually play songs, and we can do so. It's not as much talk, but nonetheless, there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to make it seem like there's not a lot of work going on, that it's seamless and easy on the air. But it definitely is requiring me to relearn some things that I used to do in radio, and to use some muscles, some vocal chops that I haven't done in a while, but we're getting it. We're getting there. So.
Oh yeah, it's so exciting.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, man, anytime. Well, legendary Richard Todd, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Well, Quintin, it is great to be on Quintin's Close-Ups, and I invite everybody out there to tune in to your new habit-forming morning routine, the Morning Buzz on 105.5 The Bridge.
There you go. I'll go log online.